about this. Missouri is recently getting interested in Ibogaine treatment. That is a big deal for veterans struggling with PTSD, for law enforcement, for any of the service department that see the worst of the worst in our society. Also has promising effects with addiction. Uh, it's a pretty cool thing, and this has been going on behind the scenes for years. But right now in the United States, you have to travel to Mexico to be able to do this legally. And tonight I have Will Wisner on the line. He is the executive director of the Grunt Style Foundation. How are you, Will?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on tonight.
No, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk about such an important subject. First off, let's tell the people who you are and what you guys do over there at Grunt Style.
You bet. So, my name is Will Wisner. I am the executive director here at the Grunt Style Foundation, and I've been with the foundation since December of 2021. I came to this position and my involvement with Grunt Style, which is our parent company. They're the nation's leading and largest patriotic apparel brand. I came in pretty much at the jump. Grunt Style had formed the foundation back in April of 2021, so it predates me by a good 6, 7 months or so. But during that time, the foundation was originally set up to be, kind of a traditional foundation, right? Grunt Style had been giving out around $500,000 a year to various veteran charitable organizations to help further their work in our community. And they had made the decision that they weren't really happy with the results of what were coming back for the investment. And they started to want to focus in on standing up their own programs. And I had come into contact with them a couple of years prior by way of my work on the issue of the PACT Act, which is a piece of legislation signed into law in 2022 from President Biden. And that was to address the issues of military-related toxic exposure illnesses. And primarily caused from the burn pits, but it does also include several other areas. And I had been engaged in that work since about 2013. I was a toxic exposure veteran myself, not by way of burn pits. I did 12 of my 15 months in Iraq at the Altaweitha Nuclear Complex, which was Combat Outpost Cache. For those that are old enough to remember before the war, when the United Nations was looking for all the weapons of mass destruction that were out there, the UN guys were going in and out of the Altaweitha complex in the white biohazard suits. And when we had got there, I was the surge element with 3rd Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division out of Fort Benning. And by the time we rolled there in 2007 with the surge, no one had been at Altaweitha since the Thunder Run in 2003. 3rd ID had swung through there on the initial push into Baghdad and had kind of leveled that place, really. And then no one really went back. Well, they left thousands and thousands of barrels of yellow cake, just waste that comes from these nuclear reactors, and they were just freestanding in a field, if that's what you want to call it, big patch of dirt. And the locals from Altaweitha were coming over, and they were knocking over the drums and taking the drums back to use whichever ways they want. They were cooking in the drums, they were doing laundry in the drums. So there was a lot of health issues really started manifesting by the time we had got on ground. And so the Army, in its infinite wisdom, had decided we'd put a combat outpost there and prevent people from, taking any more of it until they could figure out what they were going to do with those barrels. So I knew that probably was not a good situation and a good environment to be living in, but you don't really have a lot of say.
You don't have a choice.
Exactly right. So it's funny. I can remember when we first occupied that site after they had done all the, I guess the preliminaries of what they were going to do. And we showed up and there was this engineer stake driven into the ground. And there was a little index card that had been laminated and it was held on with a piece of red yarn. And why I remember that so clearly in my mind, I don't know, but I do. And on the card it said, perhaps you have seen the mutant children in Altaweitha. The Army's Environmental Service Corps, I guess it was, had surveyed the site and had deemed it fit for human habitation. So nothing to worry about, guys. And that's where we lived. Well, by the time we left, I knew that was probably not going to play out well. And sure enough, a lot of my platoon mates and other folks that were also there during those days started suffering a lot of really wicked and unusual, rare cancers, neurological problems. And I started developing some of those things as well. The VA was of no help to me. I engaged that very early on once I separated from the military in early 2009. and my primary care provider, hey, here's my concerns. This is where I live. This is what I'm afraid of, and this is what's starting to happen in my peer group. It was kind of left unaddressed. But hey, what about your other issues?
Yeah.
Kind of resisted that for a while. Finally, they gave me a pulmonary function test of all things. The signature illness of the Gulf War, or Gulf War II, I guess we'll call it, was this thing called constrictive bronchiolitis. And that was the result from the burn pits. People were getting chemical burns in the lining of their lungs, and basically turned the insides of your lungs into one giant scab. And so you could not get oxygen into your body and into the bloodstream. So the pulmonary function test is kind of where they just started with everybody that had any kind of a complaint of a toxic exposure. And when I had my pulmonary function test, of course, that came back normal. That I didn't have any issues in that area per se. But so when I come back normal, well then, okay, you're not actually sick. You have a moral compass injury, and you have seen or done something so contrary to your sense of right and wrong that it has shattered your psyche, and now you're manifesting these phantom illnesses. So we're going to offer you these psychotropic medications.
Wow, that's something to hear from a medical professional, ain't it?
Well, the confounding part of it is yeah, I had my issues from the war too in terms of mental health. So your authority figure, your physician is telling you these things. So you kind of go along with that, and so you go down that road. Yeah, so it's a very common story for our era of veterans, and went down that road. But then, of course, I'm trying to treat a physiological problem with psychological medications that also, by the way, happen to have a primary side effect of an increase in suicidal ideation. And I didn't have the worst of it the way a lot of guys did. I wasn't on the stuff for terribly long, as I just didn't trust it, and just had I knew enough about it to know that it probably wasn't something in my interest to continue to go down. But I was willing to go along to a degree. As that did not play out, I had to start, taking my own health care in my own hands and start looking for alternatives, right? Reject the status quo and find alternative modalities that can maybe do the job that I needed done. And that's during that time, I was engaged in the burn pit issue on the legislative side, doing advocacy with a group called Burn Pits 360. And we were championing what would later become the PACT. And so that's kind of the full circle all the way back to it. We brought Grunt Style in on it towards the end, around 2019, I think, is when we really started heavily engaging in Grunt Style. They lent us our platform to build what Congress and the other veteran service organizations were telling us was mandatory at that time, which is to build systemic momentum and to raise the public consciousness on this issue, so that the politicians would have the cover that they needed in order to, engage it, and because there's going to be a big bill that goes along with that. And so that was kind of that first real foray into that space, in the veteran entrepreneurial space. I knew nothing about it. Found a great partner in Tim Jensen, who's one of the co-owners of Grunt Style. And through our partnership together, working on the PACT Act, we got to know each other very well and got that comfort level. And then fast forward to President Biden's withdrawal out of Afghanistan. And just the way we left was very traumatizing for a lot of veterans.
Yeah.
And Tim, my boss, Tim Jensen, he was no exception. Like me, he was an Iraq guy. Neither of us were served in Afghanistan, but it hit us very hard, because it's like, we just had 20 years of war. What was all this for? All these people that we lost, all these suicides, all these broken bodies and health conditions. And so he was really struggling. And by that time, I had already found relief for a lot of the more mental health things through psychedelics by way of ayahuasca, which is a powerful psychedelic that is from the Amazon basin there in South America. And I'm pretty well connected in that space by that point. And I was able to get Tim connected to go south, as they say, and engage in that modality. And he had tremendous relief from 17 years of survivor's guilt and hardcore PTSD. And so that's when he extended the invitation for me to come on and lead the foundation.
Well, I mean, that's a good place to really start on all this. Is, these veterans, they get out from seeing or being traumatized by these just traumatic events that humans aren't used to seeing, except in times of war. You get out and you you're not conforming to society. You feel like you're an outcast. You feel like everyone's in your lane, or you're struggling with anger, PTSD, anxiety, all that. And you go to these doctors that you trust, and they tell you what's wrong with you, and then they give you what I call the VA starter pack of 6 to 8 medications that just it strips away your personality. Doesn't fix anything. It just makes you a compliant, sleepy person.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. Interesting thing on that class of psychotropics, the longest study that was ever done in any of these things was 6 weeks. There is no
Wow.
clinical data for the testing beyond 6 weeks. Well, there's a side story to that. It's that after you get to that 6 week part, that's when they start. If you're going to have really negative impact from these things, it tends to start around that same time. I don't know if that's just a
Convenient.
weird coincidence or there's something more nefarious involved, but certainly raises your eyebrows to consider all the implications there.
No, absolutely. And that's like this. I guess you could call it alternative medicine. Hopefully, it's starting to become mainstream now. It's just seeking different methods of healing ourselves and allowing us to try that for ourselves. I don't believe the government should ever control anything we put inside of our body if we're willing to accept the risks inherited with that. I know we're here to talk about Ibogaine, but I'd like to get into even the broader spectrum of these psychedelic treatments. And I mean, they basically have been shown to reset your neurons in your brain.
Yeah, with Ibogaine in particular, that is kind of the hallmark wonder feature, I guess, of that particular alkaloid, is that it has this very mysterious ability to reset the opioid receptors in your brain to the state of pre-addiction, and it does this uh, for all intents and purposes instantaneously. I mean, the actual Ibogaine experience can last anywhere from oh, you know. Uh, up to 32 hours.
Oh
Of
wow! So it is a long-acting psychedelic.
yeah, Ibogaine's a whole other animal. I mean, it is the most powerful of the psychedelic modalities that are really out there, which I find also interesting because it's really the veteran community that has elevated this thing up into the public consciousness. And that can really, I credit a gentleman named Brian Hubbard, who's a dear friend of mine. He was made the commissioner for opioid abatement from the state of Kentucky here a few years back. And Kentucky is ravaged by opioid
Yeah.
addiction. It's just really bad out there. And they probably got hit worse than any other state in the union in terms of opioid problems and, all the things that touches and carries over to. So he very thoughtfully engaged the issue and he found Ibogaine and became a big proponent and championed that. There was some political shenanigans that were going on at that time between the governor and the attorney general. The attorney general was running against the governor that year for the governor's chair. So he lost, and the first action after the election was to summarily dismiss Mr. Hubbard, who was appointed and put in place by and supported by the Attorney General. So that kind of was a big stumbling block, but ultimately it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. He linked in with Texas Governor Rick Perry, who was working with this other organization called VETS, which is Veterans Exploring Therapeutic Solutions. Great group. If you've seen the movie of Waves of War that's on Netflix, I highly encourage everyone, if you want to understand this whole topic and how these things are providing relief and salvation for our veterans. That movie is available on Netflix.
And it's called
those are
Waves
the
of
folks that
War.
produced it. Of Waves and More. Yeah,
Okay.
it's an incredible film, and it does a tremendously powerful job of really explaining this whole issue in the best way I've ever seen done. But Governor Perry was heavily involved in that. Once he teamed up with Mr. Hubbard, they really kind of had the watershed moment by going on Joe Rogan's podcast, and of course Joe Rogan's been talking about dimethyltryptamine or DMT for quite some time, which is different than Ibogaine, but they kind of live in the same neighborhood, I guess, in terms of how they work and what they do. And that really blasted things into the public consciousness, and as more people became aware that the special forces community was really going down and accessing Ibogaine in Mexico, where as you correctly stated, that's where veterans are going because it's legal to do there, which is a travesty all on its own. Here we are. You got this whole group, this whole community of veterans that we've gone and bled and suffered and sacrificed and all these other things for these country, and we come home and you can't get health care to address what you need, and we're forced to go outside of the country in order to access a modality that is not only life-saving, but in many cases, it restores things in ways that you don't really think about when you're talking about veterans and mental health. And I'm talking about the family. No telling how many families were saved that would have been destroyed. Had these guys not found this and engaged it.
It's crazy. So, we talk about SSRIs. We talk about these anxiety medications, Valium, Xanax, whatever else is out there. I don't even know. They've been proven to have horrible, horrible side effects. With these treatments here, it's almost like a one-off. You do it, and you're on your pathway to healing. Is that correct?
Well, it's you tend to encounter in these sessions or ceremonies or whatever way you want to describe it, you kind of encounter what it is that you bring into it.
Okay.
And it is, they all kind of work similarly. They have different characteristics. They have their own kind of areas where they shine. Some things are better for this and some are better for that. But yes, they are, it can feel like a magical experience if you have been searching and trying and going through all these things. Because like the psychotropics, they do have bad side effects. Again, the homicidal, suicidal ideations. You're not addicted to the things, but you are dependent upon them. So once you're on them, they're hell to come off of. And that's where the suicides really spike. And then we have these other side issues with the VA where they'll only prescribe you the amount, you can refill it basically at the end. Well, if you go off your meds on this class of medication, you can go into what's called akathisia, which is where it just feels like lightning bolts are just hitting your brain one after the other, and you're trapped in a car with the back windows down and the weird pressure on your ears. Your skin is on fire. All you can do is walk circles or stand under a shower and try to get the thing calmed down. So we see a lot of spike in the suicides, in that arena. So that's kind of a big problem. We're working, with the powers that be, trying to address that issue of kind of the disconnect and being able to get your meds refilled. And the biggest takeaway I want people listening to this to understand, if you are on these psychotropic medications, do not stop taking your pills. I can talk for hours about all the horror stories that are associated with them. And I do believe they play a very prominent role in the number of suicides that we have in this country. We have 70% of our veterans that are inside the VHA or the Veterans Health Administration, the hospital arm of the VA. 70% have been prescribed these psychotropics. Oh, wow. And, with the fact that it comes along with the side effect of an increase in your suicidal ideation, no wonder, that we're seeing these rates. And to really illustrate that point, I want to point out for your audience, we lost around 57,000 service members during the Vietnam War. And in Iraq and Afghanistan combined, we lost around 7,000. Yeah. Since 9/11 of 2001, we have lost 162,000 veterans to suicide. So I think we can make a pretty obvious connection. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot there that needs to be said. It seems obvious to me, but in the terms of the political arena, there's more that's going to be required. That's why this issue we're talking about tonight and what's going on here in Missouri and in Ohio and in Texas that has successfully completed a similar piece of legislation is so important. This is a pathway to actual healing. This is not masking symptoms. And again, when we're talking about these psychotropics, one of the crazy things about that stuff is that it is masking problems, right? We're medicating normal.
Yeah.
And what I can tell you is that if you are feeling grief, that is a normal human emotion. If you are feeling regret, shame, any of the things that we feel, these are all normal human emotions, and they are necessary for us to integrate those experiences into our identity as who we are and our understandings of who we are. so that we can grow and we can, take those lessons of what we've learned and move forward. And by taking these pills, it's going to numb you out. It's going to take care of all those valleys of those low points that you don't want to feel, and it'll numb you. But it's also going to remove the high peaks, right? The
Yeah.
birthdays with the kids, the weddings, all the happy things in your life. And you just kind of exist in this fog. That's why we call it zombie dope, in the
Yep.
veteran space. That's why. And they're not helpful, and they can actually lead to suicide.
Well,
And
through the
another damnable part is if you go to your healthcare provider and you say, "Hey, I'm on these things and I'm starting to have these problems," instead of looking at the medications as part of the potential issue of what's going on, very often you hear, "Well, your disease is progressing." It's
yeah.
like you're getting worse, right?
Yeah.
And so we need to either increase your dosage or we need to dial it in with some other type of similar class of med.
Well, through the history of humans, these emotions we feel, whether it be rage, anger, depression, anxiety, these were all survival triggers for us to tell us maybe we weren't doing something right, get ostracized from the community that we were in, whether that be in the rainforest when we were hunters and gatherers or whatever. It taught us something about ourselves to fix. And we've gotten to a point where we just numb it and we don't fix it.
Yeah, oh, very
And
much.
I mean, I think we're seeing it in society today. How bad that hurts just interactions between human beings.
Yeah, and what we're doing is we're medicating the normal. And again,
Yeah,
these are all feelings that are normal, and you have to come to terms with them in order to progress forward in your life. And if you spend your time medicating the symptoms away into oblivion of a haze,
hmm,
you're going to be stuck there. You're having arrested development. You are not going to progress and grow as a person. And if you're throwing on these levels of trauma, like what you see in war, or for our firefighters and our
yeah.
police department folks and our EMS guys and nurses and doctors, and this is significant levels of trauma that need to be addressed, and the best way to do that again is to engage it, learn your lesson from it, integrate it, move forward.
And well, when these medicines are used, people almost talk about it in a spiritual aspect.
Hmm.
And being here in Missouri, the Bible Belt,
Hmm.
the war on drugs was very consequential to this kind of stuff getting into the mainstream, and it's
Yes.
almost made it taboo. What would you say to those who are say Christianity or whatever religion that do find trouble in these things because of what we were taught on the war on drugs?
Well, I'm a product of that. I grew up in the Ozarks. I grew up down in I was born in Mountain View, I think pretty close
Wow.
to where you're at.
Yeah,
Uh,
hometown
yeah,
boy.
well, I didn't live there very long. I was a baby when we moved away, but we did some time over in the Boot Hill and then came back about time for kindergarten down in Ava, Missouri, if you know where that's at, down in
Oh, I
Douglas
do.
County.
Yep.
So that's where I grew up down there, and yeah, it is your exactly what you would expect to find in an Ozark small town. God, country, apple pie. Jesus. It's a good way to live. It's a good way to be brought up. It's a good, wholesome kind of an environment. It also comes along with all the other things that growing up there has where I grew up in the '80s
Hmm.
and graduated high school in '93. So I lived through the Satanic Panic, and we had to bring in our Duran Duran albums, and Alice Cooper
Yep.
was the Antichrist, and all of the kind of hysteria that was going on. Uh, so I get it. I understand, and that was almost a trauma on its own that I had to work out because when I started looking at these alternative modalities and trying to find some relief and healing for myself, that was a large part of that equation. I had to reconcile that. I viewed these things as a drug.
Whoop. I think. Hang on.
Cigarettes are a
Okay, you're
drug.
back. I'm sorry. We kind of lost you for a second. It dropped. Are you? Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Okay,
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was on my soapbox going on about how I was the product of the environment, and I had to unpack that because once I understood there was this opportunity available, I had to reconcile that with this understanding of like, well, drugs are bad, and here's the frying pan, and this is your brain, and then here's the egg, and
The
this is your
egg.
brain with drugs and questions and all of that. I believe that because it made sense to me, and I had a very clear, strong sense of right and wrong, and I grouped that in that. So I had a lot of struggle during my darkest times, trying to determine if I was actually spiritually okay with
Yeah.
taking that step and trying to find that relief through something that intellectually I'd been taught that this was a bad thing. And what I found coming on the other side, and I've seen this over and over again, where either people claim to be atheists or they're just
Hmm.
angry at God, where they are in their walk in their life. There's something about these modalities that somehow it is a mystical experience. It is a connection to the divine. You do have this understanding of the oneness of things that we are from our Creator, and we are a special person in our own way, and that our God and our Creator has a special purpose for us. Those types of understandings shine through, and you cannot it is literally trading faith for experience is the best way I could explain that. And everybody I've seen go through that was angry with God, myself included, I had a big chip on my shoulder. I was very angry at God. Coming out the other side, my faith could not be stronger because of that experience and what happened to me during those experiences, and the comfort, the feeling of love, of the love of God, and it just made my life so much better in so many ways. That was kind of the side effect of that drug, and I think these are modalities that God, in His wisdom, has placed on this earth. These are all natural occurring.
Yeah.
These are not made in a lab. These are not synthetic. These are organic plants that are from the earth.
Well, throughout history, even we've seen, with us being able to look back and stuff, that these were used ceremonially, even in old times in the Catholic Church, or it really doesn't matter. It is the one thing that is kind of baseline amongst most religions, is some type of burning brush or sage or some type of smoky atmosphere.
Yeah, that goes back as far as the Proto-Indo-Europeans and the Scythians. We have a lot of archaeological evidence on, with the Scythians especially. They were well known for burning cannabis
Hmm.
through there. And there's a whole interesting conversation we could have just on that, just the history of cannabis, and how it has been used and understood and used as a spiritual modality over time. One of the very interesting things you may have heard, the oil of chrism, the anointing oil, is cannabis, which they say is from a swamp reed. But in the Hellenistic world, this was they were using cannabis, man. I mean, it's etymologically it's the same thing, and I think we're from our position in time looking back on it, I think we've just clutched our pearls to
Hmm.
the point where we've demonized that particular plant. And I do think there's a lot of efficacy in hemp and CBD and stuff like that as well.
Well, it's a new thing for our government to regulate what we put in our body and to call a certain drug, quote unquote drug. I mean, we're not talking about synthetic, lab grown, or lab made substances. We're talking about, like you said, something that comes from a ground, whether that be ayahuasca or whatever. And they did this huge scare tactic to just get, like you said, this is your brain, on drugs, and the
Yeah.
egg's frying, and it was just a huge consorted tactic to get people scared of these ancient forms of medication,
Yeah, I
because
mean,
that's
it
what they
goes
were, is medication.
yes, or ceremonial
Hmm.
in terms of religious modalities. I mean, these things have been used since the dawn of time. They're still used that way all over the world in certain areas. Uh, but yeah, and I think they were done with good intentions. I don't think anybody that was teaching me in Sunday school when I was a kid
No.
about drugs are bad, that they had some kind of a bad motive. I think they had my best interest at heart, and I think they were coming at it from a very well intentioned place. I think they were also caught up in the cultural movement of the time, which was a carry on from Nixon's war on drugs, which there's a whole story behind that, and the hippie counterculture, and the upheaval of the '60s with Vietnam and all the protests and all the things. But yeah, they absolutely had an incentive to try to vilify this stuff to the point where it was easy to go along with. If you weren't part of that counterculture, well, of course, that's, what's going on there. And unfortunately, now here we are many years later, uh, learning that maybe that wasn't the whole story. And while it
Yes.
may have been well intentioned, some of the consequences from these things are absolutely just gut wrenchingly sad.
Well, and we're
Why
not
would why would
talking,
we want to prevent anyone from accessing healing if it's available?
and we're not talking about fringe science. We're not talking about off the wall studies by one person in their basement. Ibogaine in particular, just because that's the bill that's in the House right now of the Missouri, in Missouri, uh, they they've been you. I lost my train of thought on that. Um, Man, it'll come to me.
I've been blown up a lot of times. I do the same thing. Things just escape me sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, but I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is, they're there. They've been there. This isn't fringe science. We're on the cutting edge of technology nowadays. There's trials being done with this stuff.
Yep.
Real experiences happening,
Yep.
and this is coming into the mainstream, and we have over 22 veterans a day dying from suicide, and that's my big one. And it to me, it's like, do we have the time to wait? Every day that passes, more die. And if
Yeah.
there is
Well,
something that is so effective, like they are talking about, why not put it in the tool bag to be used?
yeah, and President Trump in his first term tried to provide for that with the Right to Try Act. If you're at the end of your rope and you've exhausted all these other modalities and none of these things have had impact for you, you should absolutely be able to try whatever you want. If it's a matter of life and death, really, you want to tell some guy that he can't seek healing on something that you know conventional wisdom or anecdotal evidence alone just is saying that, hey, this is an opportunity? Why not take that shot? That part is confounding. If our morals are so offended by someone trying to seek relief through something that you do not agree with, and you have formed your opinion based on whatever education you may have been given, but you are lacking that direct experience, then I think that is taking the name of the Lord in vain. And I think that is actually what that means. You hear people say, God damn it, whatever. Oh, we're taking the
Yeah.
Lord's name in vain. What I think we're taking the Lord's name in vain is when we um, uh, try to virtue signal how wonderful we are, and we put the trappings of religion and moral superiority or authority on top of that point that is oftentimes spoken out of ignorance, and that is not acceptable, especially when we have 162,000 veterans dead.
When talking to the powers that be on this stuff, because right now we're talking SSRIs and those kind of things, they're overprescribed, overpopulated, and like they're given to it's so easy to get them. We did a test recently just to go in. Back whenever I was first out of the military, I went in and I got on the VA starter pack. I lost a year of my life. I'm very open about that. But I went back in just to see, and anyone with a basic understanding of symptoms, all they have to do is rattle off those symptoms, and just like that, you are given Wellbutrin or Xanax or whatever SSRI they have that's got a good rebate on it.
Yes.
And what are the powers that be? I mean, the the pharmaceutical company has a lot to lose by not prescribing these pills if something alternative like this was to come into the mainstream.
Oh yeah, well that's a whole other discussion, right? I mean, we've been seeing that play out here in Missouri with this hemp issue.
Yeah.
That's not about, and they say it's for the children, and we have these colorful packagings of thing to prevent people from getting a hold of CBD oil, which doesn't even have an intoxicating trait to it. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show here, I'm a toxic exposure guy. I am full of heavy metals, and to this day, if I get injured or if I get sick or if I'm overly stressed, my joints will go crazy. And to the point, I'm in a wheelchair for as long as up to 2 months at a time while I'm waiting for my body to kind of come back down to earth a little bit. And the best thing I found for that is full spectrum CBD. It works wonders. And here I've had to fight all over the country in all these different states, doing advocacy and speaking before legislatures. I've testified, in multiple states here and there, but it's always the same thing, and it's the same argument. This hemp stuff, they're trying to get around loopholes because full-blown marijuana and THC is not legal in this state, so they're going to create this Delta-8 synthetic stuff. It's kind of a Frankenstein hemp kind of a thing. I'm not in full support of that, but at the same time, if it's helpful, it's helpful. But I hate to see things like CBD, which isn't a threat to anyone, and it is only helpful, and the benefits are profound and well studied and well understood. Why
Is
are
that
we are we super?
is CBD like an anti-inflammatory? I've heard that a lot.
Yeah, in part, it does certainly do a wonderful job with that. Yes.
Okay, okay, and it can be used for like pain management
Oh yeah.
and like arthritis and stuff. 'Cause I'm not very well versed on CBD.
Yeah, I mean, it impacts different things in your body in different ways, but it's wonderful for anxiety. It's wonderful for depression. It's wonderful for things like what I deal with the inflammation. It's just a tremendously effective modality. And here we are trying to get rid of it in the name of safety for children, which, okay, well, maybe, nobody wants a kid to get into the stuff that's actually intoxicating, has the,
Yeah.
the THC levels in it. I don't want children to have that. But how are you going to, they're refusing to regulate it because they don't want to have it jeopardize the alcohol industry. And in states like Missouri, where we have the dispensaries, this hemp stuff, I'm just going to call it straight. This hemp stuff is a monopolistic play between the dispensary industry and the alcohol industry. That's what it is. And they are running the same play all over the country. They got Mitch McConnell to sneak it into the continuing resolution back here in November at the end of the year. Now we are looking at destroying the entire hemp industry nationwide in the name of saving the children. Well, if these politicians at these state levels are that damn worried about little kids, being enticed into getting into something because of colorful packaging, fine. You have every right to address that. But if you're going to be consistent, why aren't you going after Captain Morgan's?
Yeah.
A little cartoon pirate with his little colorful parrot, and you can buy that at Walmart. Why aren't we going after that? Well, it's because there's no interest group that's coming along and funding the legislative work that would do that. But there are those types of groups that are funding this kind of initiatives in the hemp industry. And that's a threat because that there are other things at stake here, and that is like these psychedelic assisted therapies. This is a whole new ball game. This is a much elevated tier of possibilities. We are in a psychedelic renaissance right now. We are starting to fully understand the full potential of these things. We're just getting a peek at it, but we're getting that understanding. And for those that are really deep in it, they've got a greater understanding, but it is starting to trickle into the public consciousness. And with this Ibogaine stuff, it has one of the things that it's doing. Not only can it halt and arrest opioid addiction damn near instantaneously, the other good thing that it can do is it regrows the white matter in the brain. For neurological conditions like Parkinson's, it's not just treating the symptoms, it is curing the issue. It is regrowing that white matter and it's reestablishing these neural pathways, and it is resolving the entire disease. That is what is to come. So, we need to be careful. Our leaders and our politicians need to be very careful with these things, that we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater in the name of the children, which is, again, just a fancy wrapping on financial big industry interests.
Well, let's just call it what it is. If we're worried about drugs right now, almost any drug out there is legal in a pharmacy. Cocaine, it's pretty much Adderall. Your opioids, yeah, you have to go to a pain management clinic, but you can get them. And that's something that's hit Missouri in particular. Everyone around in this town, including my own family, we all know someone struggling from addiction.
My family too.
We've seen them go to rehab. We've seen some, they've changed their life around and it's amazing, but some fall right back into that same track when they come back. And why not offer this alternative method to end it if possible? It's like, why not try?
because I can offer you one observation on that as to the why. I told the story earlier about Brian Hubbard, being commissioned to go find a solution for this opioid debate, and he went out and found it.
Yeah.
Guess what Kentucky ended up landing on? They rejected the Ibogaine in favor of Suboxone, which is a
Something else you get
synthetic
addicted
opioid.
to.
Yeah, and so we're gonna cure your opioid addiction by giving you other opioids. And the fact of the matter is this as well. I think the statistics will show the average person going into rehab takes 13 instances of recidivism, where they relapse, where they're
Wow.
having to go back again for treatment.
Yeah.
Each one of these treatments is tens of thousands of dollars to the taxpayer. So by the time you've gone through all 13, that is a serious amount of money.
Yes.
They can treat you if you're an opioid addict one time. You got an 88% chance of breaking that addiction, and it's going to cost the government around between $6,000 and $10,000.
Wow.
So
That's game
there is
changing.
there
That
is
is game
big
changing.
money. It's big money, man. They tell you, dude. We fought a lot of wars in the name of Jesus. We in religion, and we're trying to save the children now on these drugs in the same way. And I don't think that that's a reasonable line of thinking.
And I mean, positives, pros to this is that we are seeing it in the legislature in emerging issues, and they are seriously discussing this.
Mhm.
Are there any states right now where ibogaine is legal?
So Texas passed a $50 million bill for research. They'll be matched by private companies. They're going to kind of match that 50 million. So that's a significant amount of money. So that is starting, and what I believe we'll probably see from that as these clinical trials roll out, then they move into whoever it is that's going to land on being eligible for those types of studies. Um, uh, Once that genie's out of the bottle, and the person that sat, their family tells their 10 friends of how Bobby's no longer addicted to heroin, or how he cured grandma's Parkinson's, that those all 10 of those people, somebody's going to be curious and want that healing for themselves, and so on and so on. That spider web grows out, and the momentum's going to come fast, and it's going to burn like a wildfire across the country. I fully believe that, because this is not, again, masking symptoms. This is actual healing.
Wow. And so with this in Missouri,
Mhm.
we have a hearing on this on February 16th, I think at 4:30 in the Missouri Capitol.
That's right.
Uh, we're going to probably have a bunch of people there, I'm sure, with amazing eye-opening testimonies on what these modalities have done to change their life. Um,
Yeah.
what do you think? Being inside of it and talking to the higher ups and stuff, does this have a good chance of getting off the ground?
Yeah, I think so. It's a lot easier. Missouri's in a lot easier position than where Texas was. Texas kind of had the luxury of having the hometown boy with Rick Perry, kind of
Hmm.
behind it. So it kind of paved the way for a lot of the other folks that would be otherwise oppositional to that. So we don't have to retake the same ground that Texas has already taken for us. All we have to do is follow their lead. And so I think that it's that coupled with the increased awareness, things like that movie of Waves of War, the veteran community, just the benefits that are undeniable, and the success that we've seen from our special forces community, as well as the conventional forces that are not as easily able to access it as maybe the SOCOM type guys. But that genie's out of the bottle too, and so people are starting to listen. And I think if they'll take a look at just how damaging the status quo currently is, with really no actual relief involved. In fact, again, to go over what we've already talked about, oftentimes it's worse than the problem, the original problem, or it makes it worse, leads to suicide. It's not a hard thought progression to get there.
No.
So I'm very optimistic on it. I don't know if the psilocybin bill that's in Missouri has as good of a chance. I hope it does. That is also another nootropic. It's wonderful for TBI, as is Ibogaine. Again, talking about the white matter. There's the Stanford study where they took a big cohort of special forces guys. They did all the brain scan imaging prior to the Ibogaine treatment, and they could see those areas of the brain that were not lighting up. or functional, and then post-treatment with Ibogaine, 100% improvement
And
across the entire cohort.
that's kind of game changing, because before that, white matter was something that they thought once gone does not come back, correct?
That's right.
Wow. What? Okay, I have a lot of state legislators, lawmakers, people in the know that watch this. We have avid voters. We have avid advocacy people. What would you say to them if they are having doubts, or they're scared of the status quo and what they've been taught on the war on drugs with this kind of stuff? What would you tell them to kind of to set with and mull over to to form an
Ooh,
opinion on this?
that's a good question because what I would tell people is going to be unique to the individual, right? Everybody's
Yeah.
got different ways of thinking about this. For some people, this is purely a science issue. For other people, it's a moral issue. It's a religious issue. So there's a lot there to untangle, and a lot of these things are challenging some of our, agreements that we have made with ourselves. We've either been taught or we have, gained through our own experiences of kind of how the world works, and we kind of hold on to those things. And then we meet these types of opportunities, like with these psychedelic type assisted therapies like Ibogaine, that can become very challenging. Uh, you've got to handle that type of a person completely different than the
Yeah.
way you would handle someone that's just, well, I don't know much about this. Drugs are bad, and you know, uh, you know, uh, the second guy there, you just got to make them understand this is not hippies doing acid out behind, the woodshed or something. This is a powerful medicine, and it is providing relief and saving lives and saving families and all of those things. And you got to shift the context. For the folks that have more of the religious identity component to them, I think what you have to really do there is, challenge them to pray with it. I'm a spiritual person. I'm a religious person. I feel like I have a good relationship with my God and my Creator, and I believe that when we take that step to meet our Lord halfway, he'll meet you probably three-quarters of the way. He'll meet you on your
Yeah.
way to the halfway. It's kind of what been
Yeah.
my experience has been. So I'd challenge him with that, and then I always would leave the same opportunity open and say, "Why don't you go set with these things yourself? Go get some firsthand experience. Find that person in the legislature that's willing to go down that road. Go to Mexico, set with it. I can arrange that. It's an open invitation. Anybody listening to this show that's a politician, you want to go to Mexico and sign with the Ibogaine, I'll make that happen.
Wow.
And then you can come back and tell your peers, where maybe they have some valid points that warrant discussion, and where some of those points might just be nonsense."
And I think what I would tell them is, I am tired of going to funerals. Since I've been out of the military, 2016 time era, I'd have to look at my DD 214, but I've had 6, 7 friends die of suicide. 2 of those happened while I was still in service. Um, I'm tired of seeing friends die. I'm tired of looking at these families and just seeing brokenness. If there's something that gives them hope, or the ability to heal what these medications we have over the counter are not doing, or the prescriptions. Tired of losing friends. Opioids. We've got a war on opioids right now. Fentanyl is now a weapon of mass destruction. If we're seeing a medicine, and I'm calling it a medicine because it is a medicine, we're seeing it where it can change the addiction and take it out of the brain and
Yeah,
make it to where one and maybe 2 times you're done. You never touch these things again. Why are we not pushing for this? Why are we not doing it? We don't have time to wait. People are dying daily. We'll save the lives. Let's get this done. Let's bring this into the mainstream, and let's heal people.
1,000%. I could not echo that any better. It's that is ultimately what's at the bottom of that rabbit hole. Is people are dying again. 162,000 veterans have died since 9/11 by their own hand. And
Yep.
look, there have been 18 veterans take their lives on VA property across this country. In Texas and San Antonio, they've had 2 in the parking lot of Audie Murphy VA hospital. And both were done in protest over not being heard on their pleas to be taken off of these medications. And a large part of that is that the pharmaceutical industry is who writes these textbooks for the medical field. Well, they don't teach titration.
Yeah.
They do not do titration well. They'll take a stab at it. Yeah, reduce it by 10. So if you're on 10 milligrams, then cut a piece off and go to 9 milligrams next week, and then go down to 8, and then to 7, then to 6, and so on until you're titrated off of it. That's not how that works, and oftentimes that can send you into the akathisia.
Well, and some of these things can kill you if you get off of them too quick, correct?
Yes, that is the akathisia I'm talking about. That is what spikes the suicide. You will literally do anything to make that pain stop. It is that intense. I mean, it is worse than any other addiction that is out there because it is so physical. And I would encourage everyone listening, and please share this on your social media along with this video if you'd be so kind. There's a wonderful video called Medicating Normal. And it is free to watch. You can find it on YouTube. You can go to medicatingnormal.com. You can also go to gruntstylefoundation.org. We have it embedded on our main landing page. Everyone should watch that because it is not just veterans in this movie. These are everyday people from everyday walks of life. There are veterans that are in it as well. But these pills don't only hit veterans this way. It hits everyone this way. And you will get a firsthand look at the hell that these people are living in. And sadly enough, one of the main people in this documentary that was followed around recently committed suicide earlier this year. So it's not a game. This isn't just an exercise of just hypotheticals and debate and all this kind of stuff. These are people's lives. And if we can save one life, it's worth it. We're going to save a lot more than one life, folks. Again, we have 70% of everyone in the VHA are on these psychotropic medications. Now, not every one of those people are having problems. It hits people differently, but it's causing enough damage to have a death toll of 162,000.
And with that Medicating Normal, if you'll send me a link, I will drop it in the bio of everywhere this is published. That way they can just click on it and go straight to it because that's important. People need to see this.
It's the best place to understand because if you are not a monster, you are going to have enough empathy to care. And you know what? If someone goes to Mexico and sets with this plant and resolves their addiction, resolves their trauma, their post-traumatic stress, whatever horrors it is that ghosts they're carrying, and they come back and the side effects are that they're a nicer, kinder person, they're a better father, better mother, better husband, better wife, better son, better daughter, and they're closer to their own spiritual understanding of their place in the eye of God. Man, that sounds like a pretty good way to heal to me. Those side effects are a lot better than increased suicidal ideations.
Amen to that. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on this evening and talk about such an important subject. Like I said, near and dear to my heart. I'm affected by this personally with suicides and PTSD and stuff, and I don't think we have time to wait. Now's the time. It's in there. It's being talked about. Let's get this done. Let's get it past the finish line so people can start healing and staying alive.
That's right. Only thing preventing it is our hubris.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to add before we end this tonight?
No, man, just God bless you for the work that you're doing. It's important work. I hope people that listen to this pay attention. I hope they follow up on the things that we've said. I hope they fact check some of the numbers and everything that we've thrown out there. I hope they go watch that movie. I hope they watch both Medicating Normal, and I hope they also go watch Of Waves and More. If you watch both of those things and you still come across it where you're in opposition to that, I hope you get voted out of office. You got no business running anything but your mouth. If you can watch that come into contact with reality and you are still so far stuck up your own butt that you can't be moved in that way, you're a psychopath. You need to be out of society.
Let go of the pearls and let's do something for the people.
That's right. This is not a partisan thing, man. It impacts everybody equally.
And that's the beauty about this is what better thing for everyone to get behind than keeping people alive.
Absolutely.
If someone wanted to follow you, find you, donate to you guys' cause, where would they go?
They can find us at gruntstylefoundation.org. They can find us at that web address. They can also find us at Grunt Style Foundation on Facebook and on Instagram and on TikTok and on LinkedIn. And you can find us over on X at GruntStyleFDN.
FCN.
So that's where you can find us. Yep.
All right, man. This has been a great conversation. Again, thank you for the time. February 16th, this thing is going to be having a hearing. We'd love to see you up there in support of this because, like I
am
said,
testifying on the 16th. I'm already on the roster.
awesome. Well, I will see you there, sir.
I'll see you.
God bless you.
You too, brother. Take care.
You too. Bye. Thanks, guys. Tonight, I hope this hit home. I hope you guys learned something. I hope it opened your eyes. We do have a pandemic of epic proportions going on, and it's been going on for years. And there has been no, the VA starter pack. They give you meds and they send you on their way. I know hundreds that are suffering from this. I know I've been affected by this personally. I hope you guys see the importance and the need and the light speed that this needs to get done. We need to save my brothers, my sisters, your brothers, your sisters. The addiction alone is just of curing that is crazy. And I'm going to leave you with that tonight, guys. Please like, share, follow, subscribe. That helps get the word out. It helps us continue the work we're doing. If you feel free, there's a subscription button on my Facebook. It's $2.99 a month, and the more we raise, the more we can do. I want to be on the front lines of all these causes. I want to be up there interviewing these people and showing you why all these things are happening, and that can't be done without your guys' support. God bless you all. Have a good night.